South Korea, officially the Republic of Korea, and commonly referred to as Korea, is a sovereign state in East Asia, constituting the southern part of the Korean peninsula. The name Korea is derived from the ancient kingdom of Goguryeo, also known as Koryo. It shares land borders with North Korea to the north, and oversea borders with Japan to the east and China to the west. Roughly half of the country's 51 million people reside in the Seoul capital area, the second largest city in the world with over 25 million residents. Inhabited 500,000 years ago, the Korean civilization began with Gojoseon, with the earliest Korean pottery dating to 8000 BC. Around 1st century BC, three Korean kingdoms emerged, the largest being Goguryeo that ruled northeast China, parts of Russia's Primorsky Krai and Inner Mongolia under Gwanggaeto the Great. Since their unification into Silla and Bala in the 7th century, Korea enjoyed over a millennium of relative tranquility under dynasties lasting for centuries, with innovations such as Hangul, the Korean alphabet promulgated by Sejong the Great in 1446, that enabled anyone to easily learn to read and write. Its strategic and central location in East Asia led to annexation by Imperial Japan in 1910, after whose surrender in 1945. Korea was divided into Soviet and U.S. occupation zones, with the latter becoming the Republic of Korea in 1948. An invasion from North Korea in 1950 led to the Korean War that ended in 1953 with an armistice. Despite minor incidents with the North, peace has since continued, with the two agreeing to work peacefully towards reunification and the South dominating into Korean politics as a regional power with the world's 10th largest defense budget. Between 1962 and 1994, South Korea's tiger economy soared at an average of 10% annually, fueled by annual export growth of 20%. In a period called the Miracle on the Han River that rapidly and successfully transformed it into a high-income advanced economy and the world's 11th largest economy by 1995, providing valuable development models that are benefiting developing countries today. South Korea is presently the world's 5th largest exporter and 7th largest importer and a G20 and OECD DAC member. Since the first free election in 1987, South Koreans have enjoyed high civil liberties and one of the world's most developed democracies, with all fundamental rights protected by a highly effective rule of law system that is rated best in East Asia by World Justice Project. Its pop culture has considerable influence in Asia, and is expanding globally as a phenomenon often called the Korean Wave. Due to a recent multicultural policy, immigration to South Korea is rising quickly, with over 220,000 accepted in 2014. South Korea is East Asia's most developed country in the Human Development Index. Koreans are among the richest in the world, enjoying Asia's highest median income and average wage. It is a top global performer in education, quality of healthcare and ease of doing business. It leads OECD countries in student skills, with the highest percentage of young adults holding a tertiary education degree and Korean women receiving the world's 3rd longest education. Driven by high-tech chaebols such as Samsung, Hyundai, Kia and LG, South Korea was named the world's most innovative country in the Bloomberg Innovation Index, ranking first in research and development spent per GDP and patents filed per GDP. It is notable for being the world's largest shipbuilder and having the world's fastest internet speed, ranking first in ICT Development Index, e-government, 4G LTE coverage and IoT devices online. Etymology. The name Korea derives from Goryeo, itself referring to the ancient kingdom of Goguryeo, the first Korean dynasty visited by Persian merchants who referred to Koryo as Korea. The term Koryo also widely became used to refer to Goguryeo, which renamed itself Koryo in the 5th century. Despite the coexistence of the speakings Korea and Korea in 19th-century publications, some Koreans believe that Japan, around the time of the Japanese occupation, intentionally standardized the spelling on Korea, making Japan appear first alphabetically. After Goryeo was replaced by Joseon in 1392, Joseon became the official name for the entire territory, though it was not universally accepted. The new official name has its origin in the ancient country of Gojoseon. In 1897, the Joseon dynasties changed the official name of the country from Joseon to Deonjeguk. The name Deon, which means Great Han, literally, derives from Samhain. However, the name Joseon was still widely used by Koreans to refer to their country, though it was no longer the official name. Under Japanese rule, the two names Han and Joseon coexisted. There were several groups who fought for independence, the most notable being the Provisional Government of the Republic of Korea. Following the surrender of Japan, in 1945, the Republic of Korea was adopted as the legal name for the new country. Since the government only controlled the southern part of the Korean peninsula, the informal term South Korea was coined, becoming increasingly common in the Western world. While South Koreans use Han to refer to the entire country, North Koreans use Joseon as the name of the country. History. Before the division, the history of Korea begins with the founding of Joseon in 2333 BC by Dangun. According to Korean Foundation mythology, Gojoseon expanded until it controlled northern Korean peninsula and some parts of Manchuria. The Gija Joseon was purportedly founded in 12th century BC, and its existence and role have been controversial in the modern era. In the 2nd century BC, Wiman Joseon, which fell to the Han China near the end of the century. Later the Han dynasty defeated the Wiman Joseon and set up 4 commanderies of Han in 108 BC. There was a significant Chinese presence in northern parts of the Korean peninsula during the next century, and the Lelang commandery persisted for about 400 years until it was conquered by Goguryeo. After many conflicts with the Chinese Han dynasty, Gojoseon disintegrated, leading to the Proto-Three Kingdoms of Korea period. In the early centuries AD, Baekje, Okyeo, Dongye, and the Samhan Confederacy occupied the peninsula and southern Manchuria. Of the various states, Goguryeo, Baekje, and Silla grew to control the peninsula as Three Kingdoms of Korea. The unification of the Three Kingdoms by Silla in 676 led to the North-South States period, in which much of the Korean peninsula was controlled by unified Silla, while Bala succeeded to have the control of northern parts of Goguryeo. In unified Silla, poetry and art was encouraged, and Buddhist culture thrived. Relationships between Korea and China remained relatively peaceful during this time. However, unified Silla weakened under internal strife, and surrendered to Goryeo in 935. Bala, Silla's neighbor to the north, was formed as a successor state to Goguryeo. During its height, Bala controlled most of Manchuria and parts of Russian Far East. It fell to the Khitan in 926. The peninsula was united by King Tareyo of Goryeo in 936. Like Silla, Goryeo was a highly cultural state and created the Jikji in 1377, using the world's oldest movable metal-type printing press. The Mongol invasions in the 13th century greatly weakened Goryeo. After nearly 30 years of war, Goryeo continued to rule Korea, though as a tributary ally to the Mongols. After the Mongolian Empire collapsed, severe political strife followed and the Goryeo dynasty was replaced by the Joseon dynasty in 1392. Following a rebellion by General Yi Seonggeya, King Tareyo declared the new name of Korea as Joseon, in reference to Gojoseon, and moved the capital to Hanseong. The first 200 years of the Joseon dynasty were marked by relative peace and saw the creation of Hangul by King Sejong the Great in the 15th century, and the rise in influence of Confucianism in the country. Between 1592 and 1598, Japan invaded Korea. Toyotomi Hideyoshi led the Japanese forces, but his advance was halted by Korean forces with assistance from righteous army militias formed by Korean civilians and Ming Dynasty Chinese troops. Through a series of successful battles of attrition, the Japanese forces were eventually forced to withdraw, and relations between all parties became normalized. This war also saw the rise of Admiral Yi Sun-sin and his renowned turtle ship. In the 1620s and 1630s, Joseon suffered from invasions by the Manchu which eventually extended to China as well. After another series of wars against Manchuria, Joseon experienced a nearly 200-year period of peace. King Yeongjo and King Zhengzhou particularly led a new renaissance of the Joseon dynasty. However, the latter years of the Joseon dynasty were marked by isolation from the outside world. During the 19th century, Korea's isolationist policy earned it the name the Hermit Kingdom. The Joseon dynasty tried to protect itself against Western imperialism, but was eventually forced to open trade. After the First Sino-Japanese War and the Russo-Japanese War, Korea was occupied by Japan. At the end of World War II, the Japanese surrendered to Soviet and U.S. forces who occupied the northern and southern halves of Korea, respectively. After the division, despite the initial plan of a reunified Korea in the 1943 Cairo Declaration, escalating Cold War antagonism between the Soviet Union and the United States eventually led to the establishment of separate governments, each with its own ideology, leading to the division of Korea into two political entities in 1948. North Korea and South Korea. In the South, Syngman Rhee, an opponent of communism, who had been backed and appointed by the United States as head of the provisional government, won the first presidential elections of the newly declared Republic of Korea in May. In the North, a former anti-Japanese guerrilla and communist activist, Kim Il-sung was appointed Premier of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in September. In October, the Soviet Union declared Kim Il-sung's government as sovereign over both parts. The UN declared Rhee's government as a lawful government having effective control and jurisdiction over that part of Korea where the UN Temporary Commission on Korea was able to observe and consult, and the government, based on elections which was observed by the Temporary Commission, in addition to a statement that this is the only such government in Korea. Both leaders began an authoritarian repression of their political opponents inside their region, seeking for a unification of Korea under their control. While South Korea's request for military support was denied by the United States, North Korea's military was heavily reinforced by the Soviet Union. On June 25, 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea, sparking the Korean War, the Cold War's first major conflict, which continued until 1953. At the time, the Soviet Union had boycotted the United Nations, thus forfeiting their veto rights. This allowed the UN to intervene in a civil war when it became apparent that the superior North Korean forces would unify the entire country. The Soviet Union and China backed North Korea, with the later participation of millions of Chinese troops. After an ebb and flow that saw both sides almost pushed to the brink of extinction, and massive losses among Korean civilians in both the North and the South, the war eventually reached a stalemate. The 1953 armistice, never signed by South Korea, split the peninsula along the demilitarized zone near the original demarcation line. No peace treaty was ever signed, resulting in the two countries remaining technically at war. Over 1.2 million people died during the Korean War. In 1960, a student uprising led to the resignation of the autocratic, corrupt President Syngman Rhee. Park took over as president until his assassination in 1979, overseeing rapid export-led economic growth as well as implementing political repression. Park was heavily criticized as a ruthless military dictator, who in 1972 extended his rule by creating a new constitution, which gave the president sweeping powers and permitted him to run for an unlimited number of 6-year terms. However, the Korean economy developed significantly during Park's tenure and the government developed the nationwide expressway system, the Seoul subway system, and laid the foundation for economic development during his 17-year tenure. The years after Park's assassination were marked again by political turmoil, as the previously suppressed opposition leaders all campaigned to run for president in the sudden political void. In 1979 there came the coup d'état of December 12 led by General Chun Doo-hwan. Following the coup d'état, Chun Doo-hwan planned to rise to power through several measures. On May 17, Chun Doo-hwan forced the cabinet to expand martial law to the whole nation, which had previously not applied to the island of Jeju-do. The expanded martial law closed universities, banned political activities and further curtailed the press. Chun's assumption of the presidency and the events of May 17 triggered nationwide protests demanding democracy, in particular in the city of Gwangju, to which Chun sent special forces to violently suppress the Gwangju democratization movement. Chun subsequently created the National Defense Emergency Policy Committee and took the presidency according to his political plan. Chun and his government held South Korea under a despotic rule until 1987, when a Seoul National University student, Park Jong-chul, was tortured to death. On June 10, the Catholic Priests Association for Justice revealed the incident, igniting the June democracy movement around the country. Eventually, Chun's party, the Democratic Justice Party, and its leader, Roh Tae-woo announced the 6.29 Declaration, which included the direct election of the president. Roh went on to win the election by a narrow margin against the two main opposition leaders, Kim Dae-jung and Kim Young-sam. In 1988, Seoul hosted the 1988 Summer Olympics. It became a member of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in 1996. It was adversely affected by the 1997 Asian financial crisis. However, the country recovered and continued its economic growth, albeit at a slower pace. In June 2000, as part of President Kim Dae-jung's Sunshine Policy of Engagement, a North-South summit took place in Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea. Later that year, Kim received the Nobel Peace Prize for his work for democracy and human rights in South Korea and in East Asia in general, and for peace and reconciliation with North Korea in particular. However, because of discontent among the population for fruitless approaches to the North under the previous administrations and amid North Korean provocations, a conservative government was elected in 2007 led by President Lee Myung-bak, former mayor of Seoul. More recently, Park Geun-hye won the South Korean presidential election 2012. In 2002, South Korea and Japan jointly co-hosted the 2002 FIFA World Cup. However, South Korean and Japanese relations later soured because of conflicting claims of sovereignty over the Liancourt Rocks, in what became known as the Liancourt Rocks dispute.